Invercargill, evening. Evening, guys. Is it on, Charlie? We on? Hi, I'm Mark Cameron. I'm the ACT Rural spokesperson for the party. Evening all. Thanks for coming out on a Friday to celebrate free speech. Interestingly, Winston Churchill said a long time ago, the destiny of man wasn't measured in material computations. And I think here today, we could actually analyse what that means, but it's about the rights of the individual, and every day, as we come, obviously we celebrate in our free speech tour, what that means. And there's a real potential with this cabinet paper that David will discuss with you later, that every day our thoughts and our freedoms may further erode. So whilst I'm the agricultural spokesperson, I don't talk of this a lot. It's dear to my heart. Every day I see my small communities around New Zealand that's suffering this changing reality. And I think, you know, I'm part of a parliamentary process which celebrates, ironically, free speech every day. You know, you go into a parliamentary house, not everyone's going to agree with you, and I think you guys would all see that. And that is the very institution that celebrates free speech. So I'm going to pass over to Nicole. I do, interestingly, want to talk to you later on at some stage, perhaps after this event, about my private member's bill, which is gone into the tin, about devolving some of the powers from central government and giving it back to council. Because as an active farmer, farming in New Zealand is getting harder every day. So, and I know I see a couple of chaps down there nodding their head. I am one, and every day I see going out the front door for myself and my neighbours is getting more difficult, and we seem to be enjoying that little bit less. So I'm going to hand over to Nicole. Please come and talk to me about my members' bill afterwards, because that would be an absolute pleasure to engage with you guys. Thank you very much. Good for you. Oh, sorry.
With us, guys.
Yeah, we're just getting out the microphones, guys. Well done. You got that?
Might just hold it. No, I'm good. Clipping on. I think I'd be used to this by now. Good evening, everyone. My name is Nicole McKee, and I am proudly a new ACT MP. And I'd like to thank you, people that gave us your votes, that helped to get both Mark and myself in to support David, to support the team, and to support the principles of what ACT stands for. And this trip is about the free speech. Now, of course, I've got myself into Parliament off the back of the hard work that David did for firearm licence owners. And he will mention to you that it was the licence owners who were first marginalised by this government, but we were the first of many. And it's about time that we start to have some honest conversations about what's happening in this country. Not just with firearm owners, not just with farmers as well, but we've got a whole lot of other people that are now being affected, like property owners, and David will be speaking to you about that. When we were campaigning, we came down to Invercargill and we made you some promises about the things we wanted to do in the firearms licensing regime. And I just want to let you know that we have been working really hard in that space. First and foremost, I also have a bill in the biscuit tin. I won't go too much into it right now because you're here to hear about freedom of speech, but it is about going after the gangs and their guns rather than coming after the licence owners. We also have a repeal bill that will look to repeal certain unsafe sections of the Arms Legislation Act that came through last year, just about ready to go through as well. And we've also started work on a whole new Arms Act. So I'm quite happy to speak to you all about that after this event. So please, if you're not a farmer and don't want to speak to Mark, come and speak to me because we've got a lot to tell you. But right now, I'd like to take the moment here to introduce to you a man who has been standing up for freedom of speech for as long as he's been with the ACT Party. And now more than ever, it's really important that we encourage everybody to have some of these honest conversations and start talking about the changes that are impacting all of us in New Zealand. So I welcome David Seymour.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicole, and thank you, everybody. Can you believe this is a crowd on a Friday night in Invercargill talking about politics? Now, there was a couple of possibilities here. Maybe TV's not working in Invercargill anymore. It's possible everybody here was going to go duck shooting, but the police haven't renewed their licences. Or maybe people are just pretty upset about the divisive way that this government is behaving and exercising power over a lot of people's lives and the way they do business in this country. Actually, can I just ask, how many people here are landlords, actually own a property that they rent out to their house? Okay? Oh, wow, okay, yep. How many people here are employers, that they actually employ someone else with their own money? Yep, okay, good. How many people are farmers, that they either grow a crop or feed an animal to sell food to other people? Yep, okay, fantastic. How many people here are licensed firearm owners who currently have their licence? Yep, there's a few. How many people are licensed firearm owners who wish they were out duck shooting, but they're here listening to a politician because the police didn't renew their licence? Yeah, there's a couple there, all right. So, well, I tell you something, I am just longing for the day of representing popular people, but all my friends seem to be marginalised in some way. You try farming and growing food for other people, bang, piss off, we'll make law about you. People that want to go and shoot a few ducks, bugger you. People who actually provide a service of somewhere to live for other people for a weekly fee, landlords, basically been sort of ranked down there somewhere with the Taliban. And as for employing other people, well, you seem to be bad people too. We've never had a government that has preached kindness and inclusion to such a large extent, and yet would make Muldoon blush. Well, it's kind of hard to tell because he was always sort of red. And I think the difference between rhetoric and the reality of this government is something that we need to talk about. So I'm grateful that so many people would come out to listen to us, a few politicians trying to change the way New Zealand's direction is going. And we need you for a simple reason. A lot of people here put their hands up saying they're in business or they're employing people. I'm in business too. I'm in the representation business. And, beg your pardon, representation is a process where we actually take people's concerns and aspirations, try and synthesize them into a narrative and a policy program, and actually at the pointy end of the spear in Wellington, turn that into a direction for this country that the people who own it can be proud of. But that process, of course, starts with you at the representation end. Without you, the whole process can't kick off. And I say to my MPs when they get back to Wellington on Tuesday, you're only as good as the last person, the last citizen you listen to. Otherwise, you're not a representative, you're just speaking for yourself. Incidentally, Parliament's on a 2-week recess. For some strange reason, schools, kindergartens and Parliament all have two weeks off at the same time. Now, the main topic here is actually free speech. And I want to come at it from an angle that might not seem obvious initially, but if you bear with me, you'll see where I'm coming from. I want to talk about the state of democracy worldwide and our part in it and why we need open discussion to make it work. You see, I'm 37, I was born in 1983, and the first thing I remember seeing on the TV screen was a group of people in a faraway country attacking a concrete wall. And sometimes things just stick in your memory. I didn't know at that time about capitalism or communism or the Soviet Union or the Cold War. I didn't know there was a place called Germany. I didn't know about Berlin. I certainly didn't know that some people had built a wall through the middle of a city to divide it, or that the wall was coming down and people were attacking it. But of course those images I saw were November 9, 1989, November 10 in New Zealand, because we're as a day ahead. It was actually peace. And I remember the gravelly voice of my grandfather saying, "It's pretty good, people, uniting." And over the next 20 years, I learnt what all those things meant, capitalism and communism and the Cold War and the rest. And it was a great time to be someone who had Western liberal values. Somebody who believes, when I talk about Western liberal values and liberal democratic values, I don't mean the way the Democratic Party in America talks about liberal. I mean a 400-year tradition of emancipation, human rights, and valuing the inherent dignity of every person to live the way that they choose. That's what I mean by liberal. That's a very proud tradition being hidden by a few people, but that's what I mean. And I could look around the world over those 20 years after the wall came down and say, yes, our way of life is actually spreading. More and more countries are embracing democracy. We won, the commies lost. It's all free markets and free minds from here. There was more free trade and more people coming out of poverty and greater civil liberties. Looked like China was going to liberalise. It was a great time. And unfortunately, none of that's been true for the last 12 years. Actually, people that measure these things, like Freedom House in Washington, what they'll tell you is that actually the number of countries that practice democracy, political rights and civil liberties has reduced slightly in the last 12 years. Free trade has really stopped and started to recede a little bit, something that's been really good for parts of the world like this that trade with the world. It actually started to go backwards a bit. And we can look, if you don't like data, look at anecdote. You look at people like Duterte, Bolsonaro, Orban, some of these crazy people that have been elected or come to power. And I haven't even started to talk about the way President Xi has tightened his grip on Beijing and the CCP and China and ultimately some of China's neighbours. Hong Kong, all but annexed, Taiwan feeling very threatened, and many of China's neighbours finding that the waters around them are suddenly less navigable. Well, these are real challenges and real problems in the world. And the question is, what should a small country that's a liberal democracy but not a military power, what should we do? How should we respond to this situation? And that's the sort of entry to this free speech debate, is that we need to be a beacon of light from the bottom of the earth that speaks and debates freely and openly and sets a good example for the rest of the world, because the world needs an example like that right now. But unfortunately, any honest assessment, you'd have to say that our ability to have honest conversations, open debate and unite New Zealand behind good ideas to solve our problems is probably at an all-time low. We've got a government that is very good on spin but very bad on substance, very high on rhetoric but very poor at delivering in reality. That's where we are. We have a much kinder, more civilised version of the same problem the other democracies have. They just can't solve hard problems. And culturally, we're at a stage where I think someone summed it up for me not so long ago. They said, this is supposed to be a time of enlightenment, but you have to walk on eggshells with everything you say. And people are afraid of getting set upon by the mob, of losing their job, people attacking their employer for something that they said, for being doxxed, deplatformed, cancelled, and otherwise made to feel bad because people like to attack the person instead of the argument. And I think that is a really sad state of affairs, especially given the global situation that we're part of. And then the next question is, okay, well, what is our government doing about it? Is our government coming out and saying, hey, look, we need free and open debate. We need to protect people's rights to express themselves? There's lots of reasons why you'd think they would. You see, I think free speech really matters for three reasons, actually. One of them is that it's human. Can I just ask another survey? How many people here are dog lovers? Yeah? Okay, that's higher than most. All right, well, because I've been doing this nationwide, getting my own database set up. How many people are cat lovers? All right, there's a few people put their hand up twice. So how many people are bi in that sense? All right, yeah, there you go. That's okay. Look, I'm sure you love your furry friends, but they probably never had an original thought. How many people think that their cat or dog does have original thoughts? There's always one or two. But sir, if you'd like, there are chairs at the front if you'd like to come up, just sneak around, all good. There's something very human about having our thoughts and being able to express them, different thoughts from what anyone else has. To scare people from expressing their thoughts is actually dehumanising. So that's the first reason we believe in free speech, just being able to express your views and your ideas is important. But the second reason is that it's helpful for solving political problems, which kind of goes back to how we started. I think, for my money, one of the proudest achievements of this country is universal suffrage. was achieved by, in my view, probably the greatest orator politician our country's ever produced. It wasn't David Lange or Robert Muldoon. It's not Jacinda Ardern. It was Kate Shepherd. You read some of her speeches. Sadly, there's no recordings for obvious reasons, but she was cutting, she was witty, she was articulate, she was brilliant. Her ideas initially weren't that popular, but she won the day because she at least had the protection of free speech, and that's why New Zealand has its world-leading achievement of universal suffrage. And we have a number of political issues that we want to work through. Let me just give you this example. We have a contest between two parts of our society over gender identity. On one side, a group called Speak Up for Women, who I hosted at Parliament because they were deplatformed from Massey University. And I said, that's not on. They have a right to have a debate. And I hosted their debate at Parliament in the banquet hall there. What Speak Up for Women, they basically believe that feminism is a movement that advocates for biological women and girls. And their view is that trans women, biological men, or people born as biological men who identify as women, aren't part of their movement. On the other hand, you've got the trans community who campaign to get them deplatformed from Massey, and these folks believe that actually anyone who says they're a woman is a woman, and anyone who denies that is hateful and spiteful and is actually trying to deny their right to exist. Now, I don't especially want to get into that argument here tonight. We can if you like. We'll do a Q&A at the end. But here's the point. There's a legitimate debate. And at the moment, the Human Rights Commission has taken a position that the trans community is right, and those feminists who think feminism is a movement for the rights of biological women and girls have basically had their view outlawed as far as the Human Rights Commission's concerned. Now, do we want to get to a place where people on the wrong side of that argument face complaints to the police, investigations by the police, to find out if their view is honestly held belief or hate speech? Because that's the proposition that's before us. And so one of the reasons is that we have this issue about gender identity, and there'll be many more issues. Another one is, what does the Treaty of Waitangi mean? We can get into that too. There's many issues that need to be debated in our society if we're going to make political progress. And it doesn't help to have one side running off to the police trying to get the other side arrested all the time. We actually need open discussion. But another reason why we might want to have free speech, and this is one that people don't always think of, is that we want to be able to make scientific progress. Much of our country's prosperity comes from extraordinary productivity gains in agriculture that are only possible with science. Now, here's a question. What is science? Well, it's mainly seeing things and saying things, making a theory, designing an experiment and testing what you see to see if your theory was correct. Now, has anyone here heard the expression chest feeding? No? Yeah, there's always a few. Yeah, so this is something that's come out of Australian National University. And again, it goes back to this gender identity. It's one of the controversial topics that needs to be debated. And the idea is that, trans women, men who identify as women but are biologically males like me, shouldn't be left out of the joy of feeding infants just due to the lack of breasts. So they've renamed it chest feeding. Now, at some point, now I know some people think this guy's completely crazy, but Australian National University have put out guidelines that people should refer to chest feeding. This is not some tin pot little college somewhere. I mean, this is, ANU's a pretty serious outfit in Canberra. How can you make scientific progress when you actually got a university denying that breasts exist? I mean, and I just want to say that it's ridiculous, but you feel crazy saying it, but you have to say breasts are real things. We are mammals. We have mammary glands. They're organs that turn sugars into lactose that feed human infants. That's how biology works. They're just basic facts. Now, I had a guy at one point in Napier, he just piped up, he said, "Oh, by the way, I'd just like to say some of them aren't real." But, I mean, but that's Napier for you, So, now, I mean, you can laugh, but actually, how do we make scientific progress when universities are so cautious of open debate that they're like denying entire organs on the human body are real? And that this is a real problem. So for our humanity, for our political progress, for our scientific progress, people need to be able to see things and say things and express their views without concern that people who disagree with them are going to run off to the police and actually try and get them locked up. That's why it's important. You'd hope our government would be coming in and defending free speech at this time, because we've already got people feeling cautious enough and scared enough by all the social consequences that there are. You know, just to add to that, I was talking to a market researcher, someone who runs focus groups. So they get half a dozen people in a room, sit around on chairs and ask them their opinions. Businesses and sometimes political parties like to find out what people think. She said her job's getting harder and harder because people are afraid to share their opinion. This is the challenge we're facing. So what did our government do? Well, this cabinet paper that was considered by Cabinet last December and publicly released 2 weeks ago says the government is considering putting in the Crimes Act a new offence, and this offence is to stir up, generate or maintain hatred against a person. And what that means, and a person who is in a certain number of categories. Now, you think about this for a moment, and that by speech that's insulting. Now, you think about this for a moment. What's wrong with this? Well, there's two things. First of all, it's subjective, and second of all, it's politically charged. You see, normally the law, especially the Crimes Act, allows you to defend yourself against an accusation according to the facts. Burglary, for example. Now, if I'm accused of burglary, I can actually go to the Crimes Act, look up what the law says, and it says that if I have entered a property that I didn't have legal permission to enter and committed another crime, then I can get done for burglary. But if I can prove in court that any of those things aren't true, then I'm not guilty and I can be acquitted. With this hate speech law, well, what is it to insult? What is it to stir up? What is it to maintain hatred? Nobody knows what any of those things mean. What it is going to mean is that people are going to have to actually think really carefully about how they can defend themselves against criminal charges, up to 3 years jail, if they have those kinds of accusations levelled against them and prosecuted in court. Now, of course, some people familiar with the law say, hang on a minute, 3 years, male assaults female, assaulting a child, common assault, you only get 2 years. So the lesson from the government is if someone pisses you off, don't insult them, punch them. You'll get less. Seriously. And of course, some people will say, yeah, well, so exactly. Some people say, well, wait a minute. There's lots of subjective stuff in law. Parliament makes laws, the courts interpret them, that's how law works. But there's another element to this which is important, and that is that it's politically charged. The kinds of people that get set upon by the mob, the people that get prosecuted, are going to be people who are on the wrong side of a political popularity contest. And that's the real difficulty. You see, I have people do cartoons about me, say things about me, all sorts that I think could be very, very easily categorised as stirring up or maintaining hatred. And sometimes I think maybe I'm on the wrong side of this debate. I could get all my enemies put in jail, it'd be great. But the thing is, it's going to be political who gets attacked. And you look at the Human Rights Commission. I mean, these guys are a highly politicised and, in my view, completely incompetent body who would almost certainly play a role in any legislation that the government suggests. And I'll give you an example of how dumb the Human Rights Commission are. You know, some people say, how could you be against the Human Rights Commission, honestly? One of the things I've done in Parliament, I'm responsible for the End of Life Choice Act, which will allow people who are dying at the end of their life, suffering badly, to choose how and when they go. You may agree with that or not, that's fine, not here for that debate tonight. The Human Rights Commission, which is supposed to be politically neutral, had their Disability Rights Commissioner in the halls of Parliament for over a year running a campaign against my bill, taxpayer-funded campaign that is, and the premise of her argument was if this choice is legalised, disabled people who are a bit feeble might accidentally make the wrong choice. Now, I know a bit about the disability rights movement, people disabled in my family. For the last 30 years, the disability rights movement has been all about saying people with disabilities are just that, people who are totally capable but for their area of disability. And to have a Disability Rights Commissioner running an inappropriate, politically charged campaign on the basis that disabled people are a bit feeble is one of the most stupid and insulting things I've ever heard. But this is the Human Rights Commission. The next group you've got is the Race Relations Commissioner, or the Racist Relations Facilitator, as someone in Queenstown said. Now this guy, Meng Foon, I've had a bit to do with him too, because he actually attacked one of the schools in the Epsom electorate that I represent. And Meng got an anonymous email from a student saying the school had had a racist ball skit where kids named Wing and Ding won the maths and science prizes. Now, the only problem with this is that that's not quite what happened. Actually, they ran a skit where the kids who actually were the top in the subjects won the prizes. And their names weren't Wing and Ding. Those might be racist names, but the only person that put those names into the public domain was the Race Relations Commissioner. And then he attacked the school and said the school was racist and all the rest. So here you've got a guy who's actually spreading racism while being paid by the taxpayer to try and stop it. And then you've got this guy, Paul Hunt, I think. I always get it, I've never got his name quite right. I think it's Paul Hunt. And Paul, had to be dragged kicking and screaming by no less than Kim Hill to say that he's not an anti-Semite. And this guy's running the Human Rights Commission. My point is that this commission, and anybody who gets in the position of choosing who to prosecute and how, is themselves going to have political views that are going to be subjective and are going to attack some people but not others. You add together the fact that the law in itself is subjective and a matter of opinion, and what you get is people going to jail for their opinions. So that is why we're out doing this tour, and I think it's why we're getting such big crowds of people, even on a Friday night, out to campaign against hate speech laws and for free speech. Because free speech is the cornerstone of a free society. No tyrannous regime can ever survive free speech. I say to the CCP, you guys think you're doing such a good job, why don't you just stop censoring the internet for a week or so, see what happens. Your citizens can tell everyone how great you are. Yeah, right. And by the same token, free speech cannot survive any tyrannous regime. To be free from the government being able to punish you and lock you up for your opinions is the sine qua non. I've been trying to learn Latin. It's the well, that's true. You will resist it. I know to death, but not everyone has your martial skills. Yeah, well, and it'd be a pretty crazy world if they did. Look, that's why we're out here opposing it. And let me just finish by talking about some of the, I think, honest conversations that New Zealand needs to have. One of them that I alluded to is, what's our relationship with the CCP? Not with China. I'm not opposed to China. We're not opposed to Chinese people. In fact, some of the people who most stridently raise this issue with me are our Chinese Kiwi neighbours. They say, you guys have no idea what you're dealing with. You guys need to really wisen up. But we have a real problem in that we have 28% of exports, probably higher for this region, going to a market controlled by a military dictatorship. They don't just not want to play by our rules, they want to play by any rules. And we got to think about how we actually build alliances with our allies, not just our old ones, but probably a lot of new ones around the Pacific Rim who are democracies, and actually diversify our markets so that we can resist this kind of tyranny. I think that getting that right is probably the most important thing New Zealand has to do in the 2020s. The other one is working out what the Treaty of Waitangi means. And there's basically two views. Here's the view from the Lands case in the Court of Appeal in 1987. They say, don't read it, forget what it says. It's basically an agreement between two collectives. And you have a role in society depending on which collective you're a member of. If you're a member of one collective, then you're part of a co-governance arrangement. If you're a member of the other, then you're a citizen, you're part of the other side. Now, I don't think it's right that your rights come from being part of a group, that your group membership is more important than the inherent dignity of each and every person. And then, funnily enough, I'm supported in that by what the Treaty of Waitangi says. Because if you actually read it, and specifically if you read Professor Kawharo's translation of the Maori version into modern English, because everyone says you should take the indigenous version. Well, okay, what does it say? Well, in modern English, translated by Professor Kawharo, it says, first of all, your taonga, your property is safe. Second of all, everybody has the same rights and duties. Well, what a fantastic start to a country, a voluntary agreement to respect everyone else's property and everyone have the same rights and duties. I think that's the best start that any country's ever had. But we actually need a debate. It's not Maori versus Pākehā. It's a question of what is going to make people prosperous and free in the long term. Is it a system where your membership of a collective trumps your inherent dignity and rights as an individual? Or is it a system where every single person has a set of rights that are free and equal as every other person? Now that's the debate we need to have. When you put it in those terms, it's actually really simple. But unfortunately people want to make it about one group of people being mana whenua and having special status and everyone else just being everyone else. Funnily enough, that's what most New Zealanders came to escape. I know people came from England to escape the class system. People came from Scotland to escape English oppression. Anyone seen that movie Braveheart? Yeah, you'll know all about it. People have come from India to escape the caste system. People have come from China to escape the CCP. People come from all over, many others I could name, people come from all over the world for a free, egalitarian society. That's what makes New Zealand. It should be an easy debate to have. Another one, just to throw it out there, make things interesting, is what's our policy on genetic engineering? Because there's all sorts of people in universities up and down this country who can do things that will massively increase the productivity of our agriculture, reduce emissions, do all sorts of incredible things. The problem is, as soon as they take that technology out of the lab, they're better off moving to California, where it's legal. And we're going to allow ourselves to be held back by superstitious, backward-looking laws while the rest of the world moves on, when agriculture's our big thing? Well, that's crazy. We need to have that open debate. The problem is, if we have hate speech laws, then you're going to have a situation where to attack someone's ideas could be seen as attacking them, and then you've got a complaint that you're engaged in hateful speech. Well, you just can't make progress in that sort of environment. So I could go on and on. There's other conversations people want to have. Usually the second half of this, because we haven't quite got our tech right, we say goodbye to the people on the live stream. Hope you've had a good Friday night, folks. And then we